Hey, work from homers, Adam Schrader here. We love bringing you this podcast, and thousands of you have proven that it's been helpful for you. But since time and online storage space aren't free, Naresh and I wanted to come to you personally to ask for your financial support through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/workfromhomeshow and help support the show. And we appreciate your support at any amount you choose. That's patreon.com/workfromhomeshow. Thanks for your support. Let's get to the show.
Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh with Adam Schrader. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. Today we have Simone Davies on the show. She is the #1 best-selling author of The Montessori Toddler, a parent's guide to raising a curious and responsible human being. During this pandemic, which who knows when it's going to end, it could go on forever. We just don't know. But a lot of parents have decided to take parenting more seriously because they're spending more time with their children at home. Homeschooling rates have gone up. The e-learning has gone up. So I thought it would be worthwhile to bring Simone on the show to share her unique styles of parenting and teaching. So Simone, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about Montessori with you all.
Yeah, well, let's start with Montessori. What is the Montessori style? And first off, where are you coming? You're not in the United States, correct?
Correct. I'm originally from Australia. I grew up in Australia, but I've been living in Amsterdam in the Netherlands for the last 14 years.
Okay. So tell us, what is the Montessori style, and is there a difference between the way Montessori is done in the United States versus, say, Amsterdam or Australia?
Oh, let me start with that first, which is I just love that actually Montessori can be applied to any culture and anywhere in the world. So I actually co-wrote a book as well, The Montessori Baby, with Junifer Uzedike, and she's based in Nigeria. So she's applying the same principles to their culture there. So there are slight differences between schools. That has more to do with training and things than necessarily the culture, though. But the Montessori approach, if for those who don't know it, is, well, everyone actually knows what the traditional type of education is, where a teacher stands at the front of the classroom and everyone learns the same thing at the same day, and whether you're interested or not, right? And Montessori is quite different because you'd walk into a classroom and you'll see all these children working on different activities. Some of them might be working together, some of them by themselves, some of them will have a mat spread out on the ground, and other children will be working at a table or moving around the classroom making things like snacks and watering plants. And you're like, is that really schoolwork? But there's so much involved. It's a very rich curriculum. So on the shelves, you have these concrete math materials, language materials, materials for botany and zoology and things around the world, as well as these practical life activities about taking care of your classroom and working with others. So community is a big part of it as well. And building a lot of those soft skills that are so overlooked in education, but it can start from such a young age. So that just gives you a little impression. Oh, one thing to say is that some people will then say, that sounds completely chaotic, and where's the teacher? And just to reassure people that the teacher is observing each child and giving lessons where they're up to. So the older children are helping the younger children, and the younger children admire and help look up to the older children so much. So you get so much natural learning. So the teacher doesn't have to give so many lessons because they just naturally learn and are curious and engaged. And these children love school because they get to, work with their hands and make discoveries for themselves.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've loved. I homeschool our 4 kids, although my oldest is wanting to go into middle school next year and wants to go to public school, and I've been dealing with that internally. Not gonna lie. And but one of the things that I love about it, and Montessori, I don't know a whole lot about it because it wasn't a route that we went down, but the intergenerational thing, and just having like the activities we go to where my 4-year-olds played with, 16-year-olds and 60-year-olds, at things, and just the natural learning that happens seems to be discounted so much in societies all around the world. I mean, what are some things we can do to kind of re-promote that even across, public schools or other things?
Well, I think you're so right. The intergenerational, like imagine if you could have centers where, and there are some schools that are like having nurseries and preschools in nursing homes and having the older generations working with younger generations. It brings the older people to life, and the younger children can learn so much from these wise elders in our community, which I think gets lost very much in this individualized society that we have today. So I'm just trying to think creatively. Like in traditional schools, you usually have all the 3-year-olds together, all the 4-year-olds together, all the 5-year-olds. I actually hats off to all the educators, because that's a lot of work, having 30 children all at the same stage of development. When you have 10 kids who are 3, 10 kids who are 4, 10 kids who are 5, it balances out all of those different stages. So you could have older children come and visit younger groups to read books with the younger children, or to show them some science projects that they're working on. They'd be fascinated. And actually in our Montessori schools, we try and get the elementary age children to get to visit the toddler classrooms and get them involved in those kind of things as well. So you can definitely promote it. I mean, even if you just live next door to a family with a different age child, rather than thinking, they're not the same age, could they actually come over, and if your child's older, they could read books and, help the other family by doing that, or invite them over to do some cooking with them. And everyone's learning from that experience, because if your child's older, they're learning patience and how to explain things to the other children. And the younger child is learning so much from being with your child. So I'm just trying to think of how you could help in the neighborhood, organize things together, not always by age, because that's not how society is. We don't all hang out with friends who are all our age. When you start at university and beyond, it's a very mixed, different experience, right?
Yeah, I found that as we've progressed homeschooling from across the 3 generations of kids, I have 4, but the youngest are twins, I found that I've done less and less at a young age, but the kids have learned more and more. Like our twins taught themselves to read at 4 and are doing 2nd grade math even though they're in kindergarten. Because in my mind, it's because they've been sitting in the room listening to me teach their oldest brother, listening to me teach their, next oldest brother. And then they just kind of, by osmosis, learned it. And I think that's something that, we can do in all stages. If you're just there, just being there teaches you so much, even if you don't realize what you're learning at the time.
Absolutely. And then also the child, Dr. Montessori noticed, had an absorbent mind under the age of 6 years old. So they're picking up those conversations, like you say, like osmosis, because they don't filter out things like, I'm not interested in that. They take it all in, which is why we have to actually, say it's an opportunity, but also a responsibility, because think of all the things that we always are conscious of, if we swear in front of children, but it's also our attitudes like, don't tell the neighbor that I'm home right now, the little white lies. They take those kind of things in as well. So we have to be really pretty careful with our behavior, I think, around young children. They're picking up everything. Do as I say, not as I do, is basically how we kind of live, instead of we really should be doing as we want them to do.
Well, this is very relevant to me because I have a son who is 16 months, and your books, both, he's kind of in the middle of the Montessori toddler and the Montessori baby, but your newest book, like you mentioned, is called The Montessori Baby, A Parent's Guide to Nurturing Your Baby with Love, Respect, and Understanding. I'm beyond that baby point, but who knows? There could be another one on the way in the future. And I'm just curious, though, because I'm reading the synopsis and what it's about. I felt like the baby stage was, I don't know, it's almost like my baby wasn't even a fully developed person yet. Like, you talk about certain things, teaching them certain things. And all I was doing was just feeding them, and they were just sleeping all day. It was just feeding and sleeping and changing diapers. That's it for the first 6 months or so. But you go into detail. I don't know if it's based on research or science or what, but you go into detail on ways that you can improve your symbiotic relationship with the baby, ideas for just getting them ready for toddlerhood. Can you share some of those?
Oh, absolutely. And to be fair, when you were changing their diaper and when you were taking care of their needs by feeding them, that is part of our role in that age. And we don't need to teach them as in, oh, this is blue and this is yellow, but we're teaching them how to be human, how to be respectful. How the symbiotic period in Montessori is the first 6 to 8 weeks. And we talk about that being a period of symbiosis because it's two things coming to live in mutually beneficial relationship, right? And so the child's getting to know us and we're getting to know them. And so often, we aren't really prepared to just cut out the outside world for a while and get to know each other. We try and make this baby fit in with all the other things we used to do. And so it's through observation, actually, that a lot of this work has been developed. So we observe our child, what they need, how much time they need to just be resting, how much time they want to play, which might just be like lying on a mat and stretching their body in many ways. And then it might be how they transition to sleep. So how much help do I need to give them? I can only know that by observing my child each day at each nap time, really, because it might change. Right now, they just need a hand on them. Oh, today they need me to stroke their head. Oh, actually, today I can just sit next to their bed. Oh, today I can go and make a cup of tea and come back and check that they're okay. So we're always looking at observation to see how little help we need to give or how much help we need at that time. And one question I get asked is like, oh, well, yeah, baby's not really doing much. Like, what could I be possibly observing? But we have like charts in the book for observing their fine motor movements, their gross motor movements, their communication. Because even if they're not speaking in words, they're making sounds with their mouth. They're doing nonverbal communication and gestures with their bodies. If they're arching their back, that's a type of communication. So we're really getting subtle, being very present. And it also just makes actually our life with babies easier because you're able to understand their cues and hopefully give them more space to explore themselves as opposed to thinking we need to entertain them all the time.
Does the Montessori model and the education style, does it change much as the kids age, or is it kind of the same principle held throughout all of the educational time?
Yeah, so that's really interesting because if people bought the Montessori Toddler, you could apply those principles to any age group because following the child's own natural development, freedom within limits is a big part of our Montessori approach too, where the child has a lot of freedom to choose the activities they like in their classroom, but there are limits and responsibilities like, but I need to put my activity back when it's finished so that it's ready for the next person. So they're learning to live in community with others. So those kind of principles apply all the way through. But what's really interesting is that Dr. Montessori also observed that there were similar characteristics at different planes of development. So for children from 0 to 6 years old, there's similar characteristics. And then from 6 to 12 years old, there's similar characteristics from 12 to 18. And then she said childhood even went from 18 to 24. And she calls this the 4 planes of development. And my children are now 20 years old and 19 years old. And so I'm now in the 4th plane of development. And I can absolutely tell you that this is so true, that the children have different characteristics at these age groups. So our parenting needs to adjust a little bit depending on their needs. So for a child from 0 to 6, for example, they're very sensorial learners. They're putting things in their mouth. They're wanting to touch and feel everything in the world. They're wanting functional independence. Like, how do I get my clothes on by myself? Me do it, you kind of hear that cry from a 16-month-old who's trying to get themselves dressed. And then the 6 to 12-year-old wants mental independence. So they're starting to question like, oh, why does our family do this and they do that? And they might not be happy about some of the decisions you make, but if you have a reason, you're appealing to their reasoning mind. So it becomes very different. In the 0 to 6 age, you're very hands-on parenting. And then the 6 to 12 age group, for example, you're starting to get more into a mental supporting their reasoning mind. And then from 12 to 18, it becomes social independence and economic independence. And how are you going to still be that strong base for them, but give them independence so that they feel like they're responsible and they're basically preparing for adulthood, as opposed to most teenagers who are just busy studying for exams. They're not having their needs met, so they're not happy and satisfied.
Do you think there's a way to implement the Montessori concepts into our own adult daily lives?
I think this is really interesting, actually, because I say that these principles apply to
Kids.
Adults as well. No, to anyone, because it's just a way of interacting with people where you're kind and you're respectful and you really listen. Like, you're listening not only with your eyes, but with your whole body. Like, I'm like having a conversation and I'm seeing how they're actually like reading me. Are they pulling back? Are they leaning into me? So I'm just observing and I'm not judging people. Like, when you look at someone in the eyes, and you don't think, oh, look at their funny hair, or they're dressed like that today. And you just look at them in their eyes, like with fresh eyes, like we try and do with a toddler or a child in front of us with a clean slate every day. you can actually make someone tear up because they feel so seen, you know? So I think that it's coming back to real connection, real love, real understanding, and seeing other people's perspectives, because we're all different and we all have to live on this world, in the earth together. And how can we do that in a collaborative way? And actually also in the big world, how can we also feed the earth and work in harmony with nature as well?
Now, you have on your website, you talk about some online workshops and courses that you have that help people. People have been spending, as we know, way more time at home than they ever did before. Kids are doing some school from home. They'll probably be back in school at some point. I would assume in the 2021-2022 school year, pretty much everybody's going to be at school. But people might also be starting to homeschool more. And you have things in there about creating peace and calm in your home and getting rid of clutter and setting up like useful spaces in your house. Can you give some tips on that? Because, it's not, we're completely changing our house from just a place that we ate and slept and spent a couple of hours with to now being, a much bigger part of our day.
Absolutely. Our homes have become so important. And the calm that they can provide can be really important as well. So we do set up our homes intentionally. We don't like to spend a lot of money and say you have to buy a lot of things, but setting up intentional spaces can be so helpful. So we say the first thing to do is remove a lot of things because we have so much clutter. I visited many homes and children say, I'm bored, I can't find anything. And when I walk into their house, I can either see nothing because it's all shoved into a cupboard so that it looks tidy, or it's kind of like a big mess or a toy box and they can't find anything. And when we just go back to basics, we might have a low shelf with like 6 activities per child. And then the activities that you have out, you need to really observe your child to see what they're interested in right now. So if your child's really into language, you could have baskets full of like, maybe vehicles and all the different types of vehicles. And instead of just saying truck, we can say, oh, this is an excavator and this is a front wheel loader and this is a bulldozer. And I know many families are like, I didn't even know there was the difference between all of those. And like, you actually can find out so much from what your child's interested in. And then if they're interested in vehicles, you could have an activity where they're doing some craft around that, or you could have books so that they actually then find the picture of the excavator in the book, and you can keep following their interests. And then eventually when you're able to go out, you might be going to the fire station to visit a fire station to see what that would look like. And so you're following your child's interests all the time. So the kind of living area, the play area, wherever you would have room for some toys would be very simple like that. We try and make it beautiful. So we have some artwork down low for the children's height. In the kitchen, I love to get children involved. So I have a drawer in my kitchen down low where they can get their own plates and glasses and things like that, because they can be so independent and help you set the table from such a young age. Like their basic need is to get water and a snack, then they can actually do that. And you can just refill it day by day so that they can help themselves anytime during the day. And at the same time, they're not eating too much that you're worried that they're going to spoil their dinner or something like that. And then in the bathroom, it's like having a step so they can get up to wash their hands by themselves. And then just rotating, like making space and following their interests. And for older children, like 6 to 12-year-olds, will need things to work on that are bigger projects, because that big mind that we were talking about, they want to make big charts and they want to think about big topics and imagination and that kind of thing. So you'll need some empty space for them to be able to create. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And you brought up a topic that I absolutely loved whenever you said people say their kids are bored. And I can honestly count probably on one hand the number of times my kids have actually told me they're bored, because boredom to me is so important in a lot of ways, and it makes your kids figure out how to entertain themselves and what they enjoy doing. And I'm kind of a free-range parent, I guess you could say, and very much like from the age of even at 3 or 4, I would just sit back and watch my kid play in the house, but not actively, jump in and make them do it. If I saw them playing, I would let them. And I kind of don't supervise them a good chunk of the day, just because I know they're doing what they need to do. They have a safe place, and they need to sort out, because in life you get bored. And if you don't know how to handle the boredom, that's when the real problems can come in my mind. And I just always find it interesting when people tell me their kids get bored, and my response is just kind of, so what? If your kid's bored, then what's the harm in that? And
we're trying to rush in and solve that, aren't we, for them? And actually, it's time for them to be creative. And in those moments of silence and quiet is when you make connections like, oh, you're right. That is like the thing I saw in the book earlier there, and then they can go and look that up. Or we just had like an art supply area where there was lots of paper and some staplers and some different pencils. And my kids made comic strip books and magazines, and they kept themselves so busy making secret clubs and all these kind of things. So some really exciting creative things come out when you say, like, Adam, I think you actually probably did just step back and be like a Montessori parent, which is like, I'm not abandoning you, but I'm making a safe space for you, and I'm going to let you explore.
I'm over here if you need me.
Yeah, great. Exactly.
Regarding, you talk a lot in your books about parents fostering a sense of wonder throughout childhood. How can parents foster this sense of wonder? And how do they do this if the parents themselves don't have a sense of wonder?
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? It's like I love hanging out with children. Like my favorite is under 3 because they spot a crack in the pavement and little flowers growing out of it. And they're like, oh, look. And you're like, oh, you're absolutely right. Like, how does that grow in the pavement? Like, I think they actually open our eyes again to the things we just glaze over because we're so busy making shopping lists in our head and all the other things we need to do. So I love that we can be present with our children. And you don't need any materials. Like, go outside, and even if you're in quarantine, find somewhere where you can be by yourself. And then, like, I'm just looking out the window and I can see tulips here in the Netherlands right now. And you can just wonder it, like, look at all the different colors. Wow, I never knew that tulips could come in so many colors. You could just pause and see if they fill in the gap. They might not say anything, but then one of them might say, yeah, I'm going to look that up in our book at home. I'm really curious about that. I wonder what the name of that one is. And so you're just kind of like dropping little seeds. You're not trying to answer the questions. You're just like in awe of this amazing place that we live in, or of someone that you met, or some talk that you were at. I love talking to my kids about, oh, I went to this lecture last night and this was amazing. And the conversations that we have. So it is just having interest yourself, like actually stopping, slowing down enough to wonder and see the joy in the world around us, to show curiosity. And that's where children are going to learn that wonder. But we need to make time for it. And we might need to relearn it perhaps too as adults.
One thing we didn't cover at the beginning that I feel we should have is, can you talk a little bit about who the creator of the Montessori method is, the Dr. Montessori? Like, who are they? Why did their method become picked up? Like, why did people assume that they were trustworthy?
Yeah, so this is fascinating. Dr. Montessori herself was Italian. She was born in the late 1800s, and she was one of the first females to train as a doctor. And she was a really passionate learner. Like, it's amazing how many books she wrote in her lifetime, but also she used then the observation skills that she learned as a doctor when she started working with children. And it was amazing that she noticed such subtle things that are now brain science is starting to find true. Like when we talked about the planes of development, and she said that childhood went through to 24. I don't know if you know, but the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational, the reasoning part of your brain at the front of your brain, that actually is developing until your early 20s. So I think that's fascinating in itself. But in her lifetime, she started working with children. She opened her first Casa de Bambini, which means House of Children, in 1906. And it was within a year or two that people were noticing her work because it was so radical what she was doing. She actually came with no preconceived idea of what these children would need. She'd make observations and adjust the environment, see how they worked with this material. She noticed that kids, would play with dolls and things, but actually they were much more fascinated with helping her around the classroom. So these practical life activities of like preparing the food and getting the classroom ready. They were teaching skills how to cooperate with each other, how to take care of their classroom, and how to work as a community. And so she took away things like dolls and then put in much more concrete materials. And she couldn't believe how early children could do maths. She was actually working with children in the slums of Rome. So when her method was working with children who were supposedly, the poorest people in their time, they were like fascinated, and they actually said, I wonder how this would work in other schools. And so the method spread really far and really fast, particularly when they didn't have things like the internet. She was getting international attention and reputation. And she kept studying children and using observation and adjusting her method the whole time. I love this story as well. There was some inspectors who came to visit their classroom, and the school was closed. So they managed to open the classroom, and they gave the inspectors, they opened up the cupboard, took out materials, showed them how they all worked, and then put them back. And so Dr. Montessori took this and said, well, if they can do this when I'm not here, why do I always hide the materials in the cupboards? And that's how if you go into a Montessori classroom today, you'll see all the materials laid out on the shelves for the children to choose for themselves. So I think that's also really beautiful to show how capable children are when we actually give them the respect and the responsibility to take care of these things.
Now, since I am a relatively new parent compared to, let's say, you or Adam, now, if I, let's say, go to a cocktail party with other relatively new parents, and I have 30 seconds to pitch the Montessori method or the Montessori toddler, I meet somebody and I say, hey, I'm running my house like a Montessori home. What would be your 30-second pitch? What would you tell them so that they would be like, oh, wow. That's really interesting. That's something I would want to try out.
Okay, I think it would actually be something that I learned from Gabriel Salamo. He's a Montessori educator in Brazil, and he talks about introducing the idea to people who don't know anything about Montessori. And Montessori, the word scares people off. So he just said, I would tell a story about something that my child can do that you wouldn't expect a child to be able to do. So, for example, my 2-year-old packed their bag and went to preschool this morning. Or, my 6-year-old makes their own lunch every day and washes up their box and puts it in the lunchbox when they finish. Or, my 10-year-old loves cooking every Sunday night, and we choose a recipe from a recipe book. We write down the ingredients. I buy the things from the supermarket, and I'm a sous chef, and he does the rest. And he's really pleased with himself. So you would tell some of those stories, some of the things you've noticed that your child is doing for themselves. Like, my 16-month-old is so excited. You know what they learned to do today? They put their trousers on all by themselves. I mean, they were on backwards, but I just said, you did it. You put them on all by yourself. And then I'd be modeling Montessori.
Well, Adam, I think, gave a great example early on, because I don't know if you heard me, but he said that his youngest twins taught themselves to read at the age of 4. That's to me a Montessori method, because I was like, what?
Yeah, right. I mean, and that's the thing though, is that you might want to say, but my child, like, everyone's on their own timeline. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to meet some of those timelines earlier, but anyway, little impressive things make people curious, and then they'll want to ask more. So that if with your 30 seconds, say something impressive that you wouldn't expect.
What are some of the biggest hurdles whenever people are thinking about doing Montessori? How do you help them get over the hurdles of, kind of letting go of some of the control that a lot of people feel they need in their daily lives, and kind of letting it be more free-range, kid-led type stuff? Because, a lot of parents, whenever they hear, because I didn't care when my kids got dressed, I'd let them dress themselves since they were able to. But, they would come down wearing, our only requirement is it has to be weather appropriate. Like, you're not going to go outside in shorts and a tank top if it's 30 degrees. But, they would come downstairs wearing, like, pants, 2 shirts, one of them's on backwards, and I'm just like, all right, well, we're leaving. Because, you're 4, who cares? But, letting go of that control is really hard for a lot of people in society. What are some of the ways you help people get through that?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I actually love to run the parent-child classes that I do, because I'm taking the parent on a journey as well. So I see the children developing while they're coming to my class, but I also see the parent. It's a very slow process, and everyone has different things that they're holding on to, and it's how you were raised or what people are going to think of me, and getting confidence in this method that it is working for their child, and my child's enjoying to put their own socks on. I'm actually going to just step back and watch that. And it takes a lot of trust that the child's going to develop, that they're going to learn to read, that they're going to learn maths, even if I'm not forcing them to, or, wow, I'm going to let them choose, like when they're going to do maths. What if they never choose it? When they forget that there's all this indirect preparation from birth that you're doing with maths, just like you put one sock on one foot and you put one sock on the other foot. That's going to be a foundation for one-to-one correspondence as they get older, When they set the table, they're also learning that one placemat goes here and one placemat goes for this person. Again, another chance to do one-to-one correspondence. Every time we unload the shopping, there's 1 orange, there's 2 oranges, there's 3 oranges. So you're just dropping little bits in. You're not forcing anything in. You're just letting the absorbent mind do its thing. So I I think building trust, being a guide to the parents, it can be really helpful. But also just understanding that every parent is where they're at, so you can't make anyone rush along any quicker. And they're doing the best they can with the information they have at that time as well. And so I like to model a lot, tell those stories, and remind people that it's really not so important. My daughter loved putting on every different color combination, and I just loved it. I thought she looked like Punky Brewster, like an eclectic, awesome, powerhouse.
How would you apply the Montessori method to my 16-month-old who does not like to brush his teeth? He does not like to put the toothbrush in his mouth, and he's obsessed with his pacifier.
So he's a 16-month-old?
Yeah. So, you're an expert on babies, you're an expert on toddlers. So what would you do? How would you apply these concepts?
Okay, so I love to there's a whole section in the Montessori Toddler about getting cooperation, and it's also based on Alfie Kohn's work, who kind of promotes that rather than doing things to kids, like bribing them or rewarding them or punishing them or those kind of things, how can we actually get the child motivated to do it themselves, to want to do these things? I almost think of it like two concentric circles. So you have one circle what the child wants to do, and your circle what you want them to do. And how can we actually make them cross over so that in the middle is something? So I'd be like, looking at your child, and I know lots of people come up with different things, but it could just be, we brush our teeth together, and you get them involved. Like, can you find your toothbrush? And where's my toothbrush? And you kind of like collaborating, as opposed to, it's time to brush my teeth, here, stick the toothbrush in. It's like slowing down the whole process so they can be involved and feel in charge. And if you find a small toothpaste tube, maybe they'd like to try squeezing the toothpaste on themselves, or would you like to give them the chance to even go with you next time they need a new toothbrush, and they can choose the toothbrush that they like. So again, it's just involving them in the process. Would you like to brush your teeth before or after the bath tonight? When my children were really resistant, I let them kind of poke around the toothbrush while they were in the bath, and then I finished off for them, and just singing some songs and those kind of things.
Really, listening to this interview and listening to you reading the book or checking out the books, this is I feel like here in the United States, parents are like, you know what, you're off to daycare. This is too much work, like every little thing, just go drop them off in daycare. Is there anything wrong with that?
Well, I think that it's actually like, some people aren't so patient and they just don't have the time. And so actually, if you're not having your needs met, then you're not going to meet the needs of your children. So if you need to work and put them in daycare, then that is legitimate. You know what I mean? And then when you pick them up, then I would say, then put your phone in the other room, and for 2 hours from 5 to 7 o'clock, hang out together, cook dinner together, put some music on that makes everyone have like a relaxed thing. Maybe even before you start cooking, curl up in the corner, read some books, connect, build some Lego together. And it's just about really making the most. Like, you don't have to really be Montessori. It's just when you're with your kids, enjoy being with your kids. When you're at work, enjoy your work. And hopefully everyone can just relax a little bit more and bring the joy back into being parents and being humans.
Well, that leads to another question, that is, working from home. So many parents nowadays, because of the pandemic, even before the pandemic, they're working from home and they're doing the childcare duties. Like me, I'm almost a full-time caretaker, stay-at-home father while running 2 businesses, working from home. And so I'm not able to give 24 hours attention to my child. And I will, I guess, implement somewhat of a Montessori method, and that I'll show him his blocks, I'll show him some toys, and I leave him to play, and then I take out my computer, my laptop, and I'm working away while he's playing alone. But what is your advice to parents who are working from home and they can't give that 100% 24-hour dedication to their child? And of course, it depends on the age. There's a difference between having a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old. So take that into consideration as well.
No, absolutely. And I think you're actually probably at the most difficult age, because a 16-month-old is going to play maybe independently, some of them just for 5 minutes before they want you to tell you something or to interrupt you, and so as much as possible, I try and see who's available that can help. And like, I know the most successful people during COVID times have been those who've, like, at the end of each day said, okay, so what's coming up tomorrow? If they have a partner or if they have a family member or they have a babysitter that can come help, what have you got coming on? up, when have I got meetings, when do I need to be offline, and actually as much as possible having one person who can be in charge of kid, and the other time I'm going to work between 6 and 9 in the morning, and I'm going to work from 8 till 11 tonight. That's 6 hours. That's as much as I'm going to get done today. And if I really work hard then I'm actually freed up the rest of the day to be 100% with my kid, and I'm going to be much more productive in both parts of my life. So that would be the first, is try to, as much as possible, schedule one person, one child, with the children. But then if you've got more than one child, it's like having a Montessori classroom in your own house. So you can have the older children helping the younger children. Not that they have to have all the responsibility, but they're learning. And, we've seen it in Adam's family, how quickly the young children pick up things from the older ones. And then working from home, I think you're right, is to make sure that you keep adjusting your environment to keep it interesting. So if you put in a little bit of time at the end of each day, and as the children get older, they'd love to help you kind of set things up, like what's our plan for tomorrow? Let's have a little bit of an idea so things look fresh and exciting and interesting for them. And then you will get stretches where they're playing more independently. Nap time's great. You could definitely make time for naps, and then really connect during meal times that you're going to be eating anyway. So rather than feeding them and then eating later, just make mealtime together, because they learn so much from mealtime when you're passing the dish to each other, when you're saying thank you, when you're just having a little conversation about what happened with you today and what happened with you today. And they're learning so much from those conversations. So you don't have to make 2 separate meal times. You can do that together and be adding a rich part of their day to the thing, which every time you fill their bucket with things, that gives them actually more time to become independent and play independently for you while you need to do some work.
Well, I think parents who get your books, or who listen to this podcast, or podcasters like us who interview you, they're genuinely parents who want to be involved with their children, who want to spend the time with them. Do you, and your strategies involve heavy concentration, time, dedication on the parent side. Do you have any studies or maybe just personal experience on how important it is for parents to spend this time and not just drop them off at the daycare, pick them up and put them to bed, feed them dinner and put them to bed?
That would be a fascinating research study. I know that Dr. S3Ep37 from the Black Montessori Education Fund, he's really involved in parent involvement and caregiver involvement in programs. So basically what they're finding is that the children who go to schools where the parents are involved, through parent education, but also coming into the school and giving a talk about something, or for Black History Month, they might come and play some music with the children or do some traditional cooking or something like that with them, that these children are having better outcomes. So it's very early days in some of this research. I think it will be fascinating. But also during COVID and the pandemic, schools realized we need to get parents on the same page as us. And so it's actually I actually think it's a good thing to come out of COVID, that the parents are being involved in the child's education, not just I'm sending you to school to learn everything and you come back and you're fully formed. It's actually too much pressure on teachers to have 30 children to raise. And if we're working all together as a community, it can be so much more collaborative and beneficial, and the school will feel supported and you'll feel supported as well, because you're in collaboration. Oh, this isn't working for me at home. What's happening at school? How does that work for you? And you can help each other, right? And vice versa.
Yeah, and I'll say I did read a few scientific studies about stay-at-home dads. So I'm a stay-at-home dad. Adam is a stay-at-home dad. And there is some research out there that the first 5 years of a child's development, having a stay-at-home dad is, they analyze, I think, if the kids, the likelihood of the kids becoming addicted to drugs, the likelihood of the kids graduating from college, the likelihood of mental health issues, and the overall consensus based on there's actually an entire Wikipedia entry on this. The overall consensus was that those first 5 years are so important for a child and their development, and having a father around, even more, mother's important, don't get me wrong, but having a father involved makes an even bigger difference for academic performance and all the other things that I laid out.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think there's also one recent research study as well to show that at least one parent, if you have one parent that's involved in those first 5 years, that's laying the foundation. Yeah. It's really important.
And here in the United States, that's before you go to kindergarten. So you go to you're about 5.5 when you're sent off to kindergarten. So yeah, those first 5 years are basically the child at home. So very good, very insightful, great discussion. Simone Davies, the website is the Montessori Notebook.com, the Montessori Notebook.com. She's the #1 best-selling author of The Montessori Toddler, A Parent's Guide to Raising a Curious and Responsible Human Being, as well as her latest new book, The Montessori Baby, A Parent's Guide to Nurturing Your Baby with Love, Respect, and Understanding. Simone, any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners or anything else you want to promote?
No, I just wanted to leave maybe with the thought of like trying to see the world through your child's eyes, just taking that moment to think, why is my child doing that? As opposed to why won't they listen to me? And so if they're climbing, for example, it's just like, oh, they're telling me they need to climb. I can't let them climb on that, but I am going to redirect them to something that is okay for them to climb on, because a child's not doing it to be naughty. They just don't know better yet. So I'm going to keep teaching them the skills till they can do better.
Yep, absolutely. Great advice, Simone Davies. Thanks for joining us on the Work From Home Show. To all our listeners, check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com. Email us at hello@workfromhomeshow.com, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can like us on all our social media. We're everywhere. Leave us a review on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever podcasting platform you use. And until next week, keep on working from home.